in the studio of the RV, in the RV, what we call it, for ArabNet. Nima, back at you. I'm here with Tereza Nemessanyi.
You got it. Right? You
awesome,
did.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you for making time. Congratulations on your new job. I heard you just joined Microsoft. And
I did.
Evangelizing with startups on the East Coast. So I know all the guys on the West Coast and the guys in Dubai, so we maybe connect the dots. But anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what brings you to Austin and what crazy things you've seen or cool panels, and tell us a little bit what's going on and if you've had a good time. It's been obviously crazy, but
yeah, okay. Thank you. So it's been a fantastic time. It's my first South by Southwest ever, which is crazy since I'm so committed to tech. Yeah. I was invited to give a talk. So I gave a talk yesterday, which was called Creating Your Overnight Success in 1,000 Online Comments. So I gave that yesterday, and I talked about my personal story of how I broke into tech.
It's really cool.
Okay, cool. So by way of background, everyone always asks, well, what is your name? Yeah. You know, and it is Hungarian and Czech. My parents were immigrants in 1967 from communist Czechoslovakia. Okay. And I was born in the States, but you know, we had no money, and my dad was an engineer, but you know, it was a really typical immigrant household, and there were very few other Czech or Hungarian families around us. So we were very close. Didn't have, you know, we would count the pennies together about where we were going to spend it. Education was really important. And at any rate, you know, I went to good schools, worked hard, developed a great career, and then got married, had my first child, and very shortly after, I lost both my parents. Oh no. My father had been very sick, and he died, and right after that, my mother was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer, and she died. Wow. Which was crushing for me. And in that process, I started to think about my bucket list, you know, that list of things that you want to do before you die. And at the top of it was actually to break up into startup tech. Now, I'd worked in innovation and around innovation for years, but a few things going on. First of all, I was more corporate, and also, frankly, at this point, as a woman, as really an outsider, as a mother, I wasn't sure kind of how I was going to make myself relevant. So I knew that startup people go to a lot of events, right? All the time. Yeah, right. Yeah, like I know they go to events. And so I thought, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to an event. Yeah. So I did. And guess how many people talked to me when I showed up at the first event? What was the event? Like, you remember? It was like a meetup, a breakfast, like a meetup or something. In New York? Yeah, yeah. And what year is this? Good question. 4 years ago. So ecosystem in New York. Fairly well. Infancy or just kind of getting started? A little past infancy, but it wasn't a hockey stick yet. I mean, usually I talk to like 100 people. Okay. So ratchet that back just a little bit. 50? Yeah, bring it back. Right. 10. The big bagel. No 0. Way. Nobody talked to me, and I. Were you just shy? I was. Didn't know what to say yourself. Do you think I'm shy? Yeah. No. Well, you know, here's the thing. I mean, as an outsider, no one looked like me. No one seemed like me. I knew I was older than everybody. I'm a woman, and I wasn't sure yet how I'm relevant to that world, so I was kind of waiting to hear and respond, you know, and so I went home and I was like, I was just completely deflated, you know, and I thought, okay, well, so is this not for me, you know, do I not fit? And in that moment, I conjured up my mother, you know, who, when times were tough back in the day, you know, she became a Mary Kay lady. And I had, you know, my dad was like one of the top engineers of Eastern Europe, but my mother, you know, who didn't have a formal education, became a Mary Kay lady. And she had so much hustle. That's cool. And I used to follow her when I was in middle school, like in the supermarket, and she'd go up to strangers like, excuse me, would you like a free facial? I give you a free facial. And true story. And she just had this amazing ability to create relationships that were authentic, you know, really quickly, and she just would keep going out there, and sometimes, lots of times, people would say no. So I imagined, you know, if Mom were here, what would she tell me? And I know what she'd say. She would say, Tereza, you go back and you go back and you go back until everybody knows you.
And let me guess.
Yeah. So
How many times did you go back?
So I decided to. So I created a goal that I was going to attend 100 events, and you know, it actually doesn't take that many before you start knowing someone.
Totally.
You know, and then you know, by a whole bunch, you do become a regular, and it was pretty great. You know, then you start feeling a little bit welcomed. Now, you know, I am a mother of 2 at this point, and so I started to go, okay, I live about 90 minutes north of New York City, so it's not that close. It was like a real investment to be like, I'm going to go to 100 events. You know, so I would actually look at the calendar and be like, okay, you know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, you know, these things in between, coffee.
Back then?
No, not yet, or at least I didn't know about it. So I was patching things together. I was on a ton of email lists. But you know, I mean, the fact is, if you do go into the city, I mean, you can bang out like 5, 6, 7, you know, things. And I called coffees events just to be, you know, clear. So, at any rate, you know, even that said, it's kind of, there are inefficiencies around going to physical events. So I was like,
did you know what you're going for, or you just wanted to meet people?
Well, that's the key. I didn't know yet, and that's part of the point of what my talk was. Which is, it's okay if you don't know where you're going. And it's okay if you don't know who you are yet.
Sure,
explore and like start having conversations and see where and how you play in it. So that was definitely working. You set a pace, you know, but I was looking for ways to extend myself differently that didn't require me physically being there. And I noticed that there were some very rich conversations happening, particularly on some venture capital blogs. For me, most notably was avc.com by Fred Wilson.
Yeah, of course, that's a big one.
Yeah, and I'd go read through the comments and I'd be like, wow, there's really interesting conversation going on here. Should I leave a comment? I don't know, you know, none of them are, it's all guys. I'm really more of a marketing business person. A lot of them were technical, and I just didn't feel comfortable. And then at an event, Fred was there, and we actually went up in the elevator together. So, you know, inspired by my mother, I was like, hey, Fred. and I said, you know, I read your blog, I read your comments, and they're great. But it's a bummer to me that women don't comment. And he said to me, and I'll never forget it, he goes, you know, I really, really wish that women commented more. But for some reason, and I don't know why, they don't show up.
Interesting.
And I went, ding. I think I've just been invited to comment.
Cool.
You know, you convert it. So at that moment, I decided I would leave 1,000 comments online.
Hold on. So I'm scared what the next thing is, because
I know. You imagine me like in a bulldozer, like, you know, get
the next one is 10,000, so maybe 10,000
Well,
tweets?
so it was actually 3,000 later. You know, you focus on the task that you have at hand.
Sure.
You know, and you create a goal, and you're like, okay, well, if I'm going for 1,000, and let's say, you know, in a year, could I do 1,000? You know, 3 comments a day, I could probably do that. Or maybe 1 a day 3 years later.
Right. Is it tough? Or is it just that you...
Well, I figured 1 a day. I was like, let me, first thing in the morning, as part of my, after I brush my teeth, let me read the blog and like leave a comment.
Sure.
You know, just boom, 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 you know, each day.
Cool.
And so I did, and I was nervous as all heck. I mean, seriously. And then someone upvoted it. Or I think maybe Fred upvoted it. So I'm like, oh my God, he likes me, you know? And then the next day I leave another, you know, and someone upvoted it. So I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. And then people respond, and so you respond, and it's like, oh, I just left 2 today, you know, and someone responds to that, and you get into a thread. You may have had 5 or 10, you know, comments in a day. And upvotes are happening, and you get involved in the conversation, and you see who is that person who commented, and you click through, and you learn, you're like, oh, this is a really interesting person I'd like to know. You also start seeing patterns of people who tend to empathize with each other on various points of view. Sometimes people say, hey, I'd really like to hear what Tereza has to say about this. I mean, like, oh my goodness, that's amazing.
That's hilarious.
So essentially, you know, by the time I was done, or I mean, I haven't left comments in about a year or 2, because I'll tell you why in a minute. I got very busy on other things. But I mean, I've left about 3,500 comments, but by the time I was done, I had written an op-ed for Reuters. I mean, some of my comments went viral. I'd written an op-ed for Reuters, was selected as one of Forbes 10 female entrepreneurs to watch. I was founder, CEO of my own company.
That's hilarious.
It was funded. You know, so now, truth be told, the company itself wound up not working out. We ran out of runway, blah, blah, blah. But should I have not gotten started on this journey?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it was the best thing I ever did.
So that's interesting because going to events may have cost some money, but you know, realistically.
Well, the thing is, you go to a few and you start to realize what's worth it.
Sure.
And you start finding the value. You need to go to a few in order to start getting the value for the money, and you can get pretty efficient pretty quickly.
No, but my point is that leaving the comments obviously doesn't cost anything.
Totally free.
And A, you get involved in the conversation. B, you learn. Obviously, you're reading the stuff. And then I'm assuming that some of the people that you've connected along the way virtually, you are now bumping into the South by.
One of them became my CTO. I've bumped into a ton at South by. Oh, the other thing is that there's this auspicious loop where people know you online, and then when they see you at an event offline, they're like, oh, I love your comments. And they may have not even ever upvoted.
That's
you know. So it was completely enriching, and it changed my life.
So networking at its best virtually through engaging the audience and commenting.
And being yourself.
Being yourself, exactly. And so,
yeah.
And again, maybe not even knowing what the end goal is, but ultimately it led you to different opportunities, connecting with different people, and then now obviously you're joining Microsoft. I mean, did you ever think that
never.
Never. Right? And that's kind of the cool part, right? And I think that's so let's talk a little bit about South by. That's kind of South by in its best. Like, you don't really know where you're gonna end up. You may have some appointments, some panels, and some parties, but it's the kind of bumping into random people or people that, hey, meet so and so. Oh my God, I know you. Hey, what's going on? How you been?
Yeah.
And it's this this networking at like million miles an hour, but it's all kind of connected, and it's fun, it's crazy, but I'm sure you're having a good time here. Anything crazy or cool that you've seen here that you want to share with our audience?
Well, I guess all I would say is that in the past few years I had a very limited personal budget. So I had another thing about events is what I've kind of shifted into now is that I'll only go if I'm speaking. Okay. So that's kind of the next level up, right? Mm-hmm. And or if it's something that is just I completely want to or have to go to. So I got really involved in the TED Active community. So I attended that last year for my company, and that was sort of the one that I was going to do with a limited budget. So I've gotten into figuring out which free things, or if you're speaking then you don't pay, so I do mostly that, and then I would like really blow it on one major thing that I would really study ahead of time, who was going to be there and what do I be very strategic about what I get there. Well, I attended my second TED Active this year and got to speak, got to give a talk, which was an incredible experience. Now I'll tell you, I had chosen my budget. I had gone with TED Active and not with South by Southwest last year because I thought, oh, I'm older and I'm not going to fit in. Do you hear a pattern? It's similar to what I thought, before.
What does Mom say?
Yeah. But because I got to speak this year, I was like, okay, well, that's the way that I want to go in. Well, I am having the time of my life.
Awesome.
And better than I ever even imagined, and I knew it was going to be great. But a lot of it is that a ton of people that I've met virtually that I have not had the opportunity to meet in person in New York, they're all here, and it's like, it's crazy. I mean, like the number of, my phone is a video game. My thumbs are sore.
Totally.
From setting stuff up. So I'm having an amazing time.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. I like hearing these kinds of stories because even for our audience, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Even if you don't know where you're headed, just keep marching.
Yeah, and we all feel like outsiders.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Totally.
Every single one of us. And it could be for any reason. It could be about where you're from or what language you speak or your gender or your age or your educational background. We all feel it sometimes. And the thing is that if you stay silent and if you don't show up, then you're effectively invisible. You're invisible. Yeah. And so you need to break out of invisible, and the world is better if we know who you are.
Of course.
And know that you're there.
Yeah.
Whatever your point of view is.
That's awesome.
It needs to be known. So I just I get almost teary when I think about the voices that we don't hear, that we must.
Of course.
You know.
No, it's important.
So
that's awesome. That's great advice, and I hope people are inspired by your story, because I think it's super cool, and it's obviously worked. So congratulations.
Fist bump.
Fist bump. Hope you enjoy the rest of your time here and party a little bit, and then maybe we'll connect. I'll be in New York in May, so maybe we can connect there and do another chat and catch up and see how things are going at Microsoft.
Oh, thank you. Awesome. It would be delightful.
Awesome.
And just, I want to send out just lots of love to all of your viewers.
Awesome.
And
they're
great
they're
stuff.
excited to actually see people who are doing things, and we want to share experiences with them. So it's super cool. So appreciate you making the time. Thank you so much, and have fun, and hopefully your thumbs can get some rest.
I know, I'll ice them. It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, Tereza. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot. We'll see you next time. Peace.